The millionaire widower's twins couldn't sleep until the new black nanny did something unthinkable. Millionaire widower Richard Pemberton's world crumbles when his 4-year-old twins Emma and Oliver can't sleep through the night, 6 months after losing their mother in a tragic accident. 4 professional nannies have failed to solve their nighttime terrors, leaving Richard desperate as his children grow more exhausted and withdrawn despite access to the best pediatric experts money can buy. When Grace Williams arrives with unconventional methods that challenge everything previous caregivers attempted, Richard must decide whether to trust someone whose approach seems unthinkable by traditional standards. Sometimes the most profound healing requires abandoning professional protocols in favor of human connection that meets children exactly where their hearts need to be held. Richard Pemberton stands in the marble foyer of his $15 million estate, adjusting his black tie for the 3rd time this morning as he prepares to face another day of board meetings that feel meaningless since his wife Catherine's death in a car accident 6 months ago. The tech mogul who built a software empire worth $800 million now struggles with the simple task of getting his 4-year-old twins, Emma and Oliver, to sleep through the night without their mother's gentle lullabies and bedtime stories. The mansion that once echoed with family laughter has become a mausoleum of memories, its expensive furnishings unable to provide the warmth that Catherine brought to every room simply by being present. Richard's attempts to maintain normalcy for his children while managing his grief have resulted in a household where everyone goes through the motions of living without experiencing the joy that makes life meaningful. The twins' sleepless nights have become a crisis that Richard's wealth can't solve, their tears and nightmares serving as constant reminders of the void that no amount of expensive toys or professional therapy can fill. Emma clutches her mother's silk scarf while Oliver refuses to sleep in his own bed. Both children struggling with loss they're too young to understand, but old enough to feel in every quiet moment when their father thinks they're not watching. Richard has cycled through 4 nannies in 5 months, each highly credentialed professional offering different theories about child psychology and sleep training that treats symptoms rather than addressing the fundamental problem. These children need someone who understands that healing requires love rather than technique, connection rather than protocol. The Pemberton household staff moves through their duties with professional efficiency that masks their concern for a family that has lost its heart. Their carefully maintained routines creating structure without spontaneity, order without joy. Richard's executive assistant schedules interview after interview with potential nannies whose impressive resumes and pediatric credentials promise solutions that previous experts couldn't deliver, while the twins grow more withdrawn and exhausted with each failed attempt to establish new routines with strangers who see them as problems to solve rather than people to understand. The irony isn't lost on Richard that the man who revolutionized how families communicate through technology can't figure out how to help his own children feel safe enough to sleep peacefully in their own home. Today's interview represents Richard's last hope before considering more drastic measures like residential treatment programs that would separate him from the children who represent his only remaining connection to Catherine's love and legacy. Grace Williams arrives at the estate with references that emphasize her experience with grieving children rather than her educational credentials, her approach to childcare rooted in understanding that healing happens through relationship rather than methodology. The contrast between Grace's warm presence and the cold efficiency of previous candidates is immediately apparent to Richard, whose business instincts recognize authenticity when professional desperation has made him expert at detecting pretense and superficial competence masquerading as genuine care. Grace Williams enters the Pemberton estate with the quiet confidence of someone who spent 15 years helping children navigate life's most difficult transitions. Her experience as a pediatric grief counselor having taught her that healing requires patience, creativity, and the willingness to meet children exactly where they are emotionally rather than where adults think they should be. At 42, the former nurse turned specialized nanny understands that sleepless nights often reflect deeper fears that can't be addressed through conventional sleep training methods or behavioral modification techniques that ignore the underlying trauma causing the symptoms. Her approach to the twins' crisis will require Richard to trust methods that seem unconventional compared to the clinical strategies that previous nannies have attempted, techniques that prioritize emotional healing over immediate behavioral compliance. The first night Grace spends with Emma and Oliver reveals the full extent of their sleep difficulties. Nightmares that leave them screaming for their mother, anxiety that makes bedtime feel like abandonment, and the kind of hypervigilance that prevents them from relaxing enough for natural sleep cycles to function properly. Grace observes their patterns without immediately implementing changes, understanding that effective intervention requires comprehending each child's unique relationship with grief and fear before introducing new routines that might feel like additional losses rather than sources of comfort. Her background working with children who've experienced trauma has taught her that rushing healing often deepens wounds, while patience and consistency create the safety necessary for genuine recovery to begin. Richard watches Grace's initial interactions with his children from the hallway, noting how she responds to their tears with empathy rather than frustration, how she validates their fears instead of dismissing them as irrational, how she creates space for their emotions while maintaining gentle boundaries that help them feel secure rather than overwhelmed. Her bedtime approach differs dramatically from previous nannies who emphasize strict schedules and behavioral rewards, instead focusing on creating emotional connection that makes sleep feel safe rather than scary. Grace's methodology challenges Richard's assumptions about professional childcare, while offering hope that someone finally understands what his children need to heal rather than simply comply with adult expectations about appropriate sleeping behavior. The breakthrough begins when Grace introduces what she calls memory circles, bedtime conversations where Emma and Oliver share favorite recollections of their mother, while Grace helps them understand that love continues even when physical presence ends, that Catherine's care for them remains real even though her body is gone. This therapeutic approach to bedtime creates space for grief while building new associations with sleep that emphasize connection rather than abandonment, comfort rather than fear. Richard realizes that Grace isn't just trying to make his children sleep. She's helping them learn to feel safe again in a world that suddenly feels dangerous and unpredictable without their mother's protection. Grace's unconventional approach to the twins' sleep crisis involves elements that make Richard initially uncomfortable. Dim lighting that mimics natural sunset rather than bright overhead fixtures. Soft music that incorporates sounds of nature rather than silence. And most surprisingly, Grace's willingness to sleep on the floor of the children's room until they feel secure enough to rest peacefully in their own beds. Her method challenges everything Richard learned from previous nannies about establishing independence and maintaining professional boundaries. But Grace's gentle explanation helps him understand that healing traumatized children sometimes requires temporary dependence before healthy independence can develop. Her presence in their room isn't about creating bad habits. It's about rebuilding the sense of safety that their mother's death destroyed. The transformation in Emma and Oliver begins slowly but unmistakably, their nighttime terror gradually giving way to peaceful sleep as Grace's consistent presence reassures them that adults can be trusted to stay when children are vulnerable and afraid. Her bedtime stories don't avoid mention of their mother, but instead incorporate Catherine's memory in ways that make her absence feel less like abandonment and more like a different form of love that continues protecting them even from a distance. Grace's background in child psychology allows her to navigate these conversations with sensitivity that honors their grief while building hope for the future, teaching them that feeling sad about missing their mother is normal and healthy rather than something to overcome or outgrow. Richard finds himself drawn into Grace's bedtime routines, initially as an observer, but gradually as a participant who learns new ways to connect with his children's emotional needs rather than just their physical care. Grace's methods teach him that effective parenting requires vulnerability and presence rather than just providing resources and maintaining schedules, that his children need his emotional availability more than his financial security. The millionaire who solved complex business problems through analytical thinking discovers that family healing requires heart-centered approaches that can't be purchased or programmed, but must be cultivated through consistent, patient love that meets children where they are rather than where grief-stricken parents wish they could be. The most remarkable aspect of Grace's intervention is how naturally Emma and Oliver respond to someone who treats their grief as valid rather than problematic, who acknowledges their loss while helping them discover that love doesn't disappear when people die, but transforms into different kinds of presence and protection. Their sleep gradually improves not because Grace forces compliance, but because she creates conditions where rest feels safe again, where bedtime becomes associated with comfort and connection rather than fear and abandonment. Richard realizes that Grace has given his family something that money couldn't buy, the understanding that healing happens through relationship rather than technique, through love rather than methodology. As Emma and Oliver's sleep patterns normalize under Grace's care, Richard begins recognizing how his own grief has prevented him from providing the emotional presence his children needed during their most vulnerable moments. His well-intentioned focus on maintaining stability through expensive resources and professional services has inadvertently created distance when proximity and emotional availability were what his family required for healing. Grace's success with the twins teaches Richard that effective parenting after loss requires parents to process their own grief while remaining emotionally accessible to children who need reassurance that the remaining parent won't also disappear or become emotionally unavailable due to overwhelming sadness. Grace's influence extends beyond bedtime routines to transform the entire household atmosphere, her presence bringing warmth and spontaneity that had been missing since Catherine's death. She encourages family activities that create new positive memories while honoring old ones, helping Richard understand that moving forward doesn't require forgetting the past, but rather integrating loss into a continuing story of love and resilience. Her approach to grief counseling through daily interaction rather than formal therapy sessions allows healing to happen naturally within the context of normal family life, making recovery feel organic rather than clinical. The relationship between Richard and Grace evolves from employer-employee to something approaching partnership as they collaborate on rebuilding family life that acknowledges loss while creating space for joy and growth. Richard's initial skepticism about Grace's unconventional methods gives way to deep respect for her wisdom about children's emotional needs and her ability to create healing environments through patience, consistency, and genuine care. Their conversations about the twins' progress become opportunities for Richard to process his own grief while learning parenting skills that prioritize emotional connection over behavioral compliance. 6 months after Grace's arrival, the Pemberton household has been transformed from a place of quiet desperation into a home where laughter coexists with memories, where bedtime brings peace rather than terror, where children feel safe to experience the full range of emotions without fear of overwhelming or losing their remaining parent. Richard's business success takes on new meaning as he recognizes that the most important leadership he provides happens at home, where Grace has taught him that strength includes vulnerability and success includes the ability to create emotional safety for the people who depend on him most. 1 year after Grace Williams joined the Pemberton family, the transformation extends far beyond resolved sleep issues to encompass a household where grief has been integrated into daily life without dominating it, where children feel secure enough to grow and explore while maintaining connection to their mother's memory. Emma and Oliver now sleep peacefully through the night, their dreams filled with adventures rather than nightmares, their bedtime conversations with Grace, and their father creating new traditions that honor the past while building toward the future. Richard has learned to balance his business responsibilities with emotional presence, understanding that successful parenting requires the same strategic thinking he brings to corporate leadership combined with vulnerability and patience that can't be delegated to employees or purchased through services. Grace's impact on the family inspires Richard to establish a foundation focused on supporting families dealing with grief and loss, particularly single parents who struggle to provide emotional stability while managing their own trauma. The Grace Williams Family Healing Center becomes a model for integrating professional grief counseling with practical family support, recognizing that healing happens most effectively when therapeutic intervention occurs within the context of daily life rather than isolated clinical settings. Grace's methods are studied and replicated in programs that train caregivers to address children's emotional needs through relationship-based healing rather than purely behavioral modification techniques. The success of the Pemberton family's healing journey becomes a testament to the power of finding the right person for specific challenges rather than simply hiring the most credentialed available candidate. Grace's background as a specialized grief counselor combined with her natural warmth and patience created exactly what Emma and Oliver needed to feel safe again, while her wisdom about family dynamics helped Richard learn to parent effectively during one of life's most difficult transitions. Their story demonstrates that healing requires matching specific expertise with individual family needs rather than applying generic solutions to complex emotional challenges. Richard's relationship with Grace evolves into deep friendship and professional partnership as they collaborate on expanding grief support services to other families facing similar challenges. Their shared commitment to helping children heal, creating a legacy that extends far beyond the Pemberton household. The twins grow into confident, emotionally healthy children who understand that loss is part of life but doesn't have to define it. That love continues in new forms even when physical presence ends. That families can be rebuilt around different structures while maintaining connection to important memories and relationships. 5 years after Grace Williams first helped Emma and Oliver sleep peacefully through the night, the Pemberton family has become a model of how professional caregiving can transform from service provision into genuine family partnership when the right person brings both expertise and heart to healing work. Grace remains with the family not as employee, but as chosen family member whose wisdom about child development and grief recovery continues guiding the twins' growth while supporting Richard's evolution into the kind of father who prioritizes emotional presence alongside financial provision. Emma and Oliver, now 9 years old, thrive academically and socially while maintaining healthy relationships with their mother's memory, their resilience reflecting the security that Grace's patient care created during their most vulnerable years. The Grace Williams Family Healing Center has become a nationally recognized model for addressing childhood grief through integrated family support that combines professional counseling with practical daily care, demonstrating that healing happens most effectively when therapeutic intervention occurs within loving relationships rather than clinical isolation. Grace's methods have trained hundreds of specialized caregivers who work with families facing loss, while Richard's foundation provides resources that make such support accessible to families regardless of their economic circumstances. Their collaboration proves that addressing social problems requires both financial resources and authentic expertise, both systemic thinking and individual compassion. Richard's business success takes on deeper meaning as he recognizes that true wealth includes the ability to create healing environments for others, that leadership in corporate settings translates effectively to advocacy for families who need support during life's most challenging transitions. His approach to philanthropy reflects lessons learned from Grace about meeting people where they are rather than where others think they should be, about providing resources that empower healing rather than creating dependency, about recognizing that the most valuable interventions often involve relationship rather than just financial assistance. The transformation of the Pemberton household from a place of silent grief to a home filled with love, laughter, and healthy processing of loss demonstrates that the right caregiver can create miracles when expertise meets need in environments where healing is prioritized over mere behavioral compliance. Grace's unthinkable approach, sleeping on the floor, incorporating grief into bedtime routines, treating children's emotions as valid rather than problematic, prove that unconventional methods can produce extraordinary results when implemented by someone who understands that healing requires love, patience, and the courage to challenge assumptions about what professional caregiving should look like when serving families in crisis. True healing happens when professional expertise combines with authentic love, when caregivers prioritize emotional safety over behavioral compliance. Grace's willingness to sleep on the floor proved that sometimes the most effective interventions require abandoning conventional boundaries to meet children where their grief lives. Hit subscribe for more incredible stories showing that the right person with the right heart can transform any family's darkest moments into foundations for lasting peace.